come together, as they say.
Yesterday was
That is the definition of
Dude,
success.
I need those from work.
okay.
Strong Kabbalah.
Let's. Yeah, we can do it right now. Oh my goodness. Okay, so we translated this whole idea of Avram into Avraham, which is essentially Avram gains the hay, which is Bina. But how do you gain the hay? By going up to the Kesser. So we translated this whole idea into Avoda, so to speak, which is the Indian of mitzvahs. That Hashem does this, as it were, and the fact that we can pick up a lulav and esrog, or the fact that we can put our tefillin, is basically the mushal, i.e., the lower level of enclosure, which really can only happen if you go up to the Kesser and find ways to bring chokhmah down. So when you're looking at the actual mitzvah, when you're performing the mitzvah, I should say, you're actually, even though you're coming down, you're bringing Torah down into a physical form. On the contrary, you might think that therefore it's some kind of a contraction. On the opposite, on the contrary, the only way to get Torah into a physical form is you go up way, way higher even than the source of Torah. You have to go into the Kesser, because we said the source of Torah is Chokhmah. And the source of the mitzvahs is in the Archen Livnonis de Galgalta. What does that mean?
Yes, the path of the skull.
Very good. The white pathways of the skull, which is the skull represents above Chokhmah, into the Kesser. And how many pathways will you find there?
6 through 20.
Good, 613 plus the 7 mitzvahs of the Rabban. You find 620, which equals Gematria Kesser. And the idea is that therefore the physical mitzvahs which come down below the Torah, they're called 620 pillars, meaning they join the floor to the ceiling, pillars of light, which actually call upon the level of Kesser, which is above the Torah. So when you're doing a mitzvah, even though you're sort of stumbling yourself down below into a physical form, you're accessing something which is even above Chokhmah Vatzilus. And on the contrary, even Chokhmah Vatzilus benefits when you do that, because Chokhmah Vatzilus cannot on its own receive the Kesser. It can only receive it when it gives over and extends it down below into a physical form. Then you sort of unleash this level of Kesser, which is primarily seen in the mitzvah. But since the mitzvah is connected all the way to the ceiling, then everything in between makes this Yechud Elyon sort of comes out and presents itself into all worlds, even Chokhmah Ilah, and therefore there's an aliyah to Chokhmah itself by a Jew doing the mitzvah. I think that sums up what we said yesterday, basically, right?
Sounds good.
Does everyone get that?
I got it.
Davidel, you on board?
Getting on board.
You follow that?
Since I have the coffee, I'll follow everything.
Well, you better drink up, son.
Pretty
Well.
quick.
Bottoms up.
Bottoms down.
It's a bit of a mouthful there, but I mean, we said it at length yesterday.
We go down.
Okay. So then we started getting into this Indian of tzedakah as another metaphor for this, and we'll take it from the middle of the last paragraph on page 22. The line starts Meha Chochma. See that when there's a period right after that?
Middle.
You see that, Levi?
Nope.
The first column on page 22, the bottom paragraph, the middle of that paragraph, the line starts Meha Chochma, and there's a period right after it.
Cool.
You got it?
Yeah, thanks.
Well.
V'lechein na'aseh yichud elyon al yedei dvarim gashmi, and as we just said, a tremendous yichud, a joining. Like there's no more lower level to connect. So since you've basically connected to the bottom to the top when you do a mitzvah, and therefore you unify godliness in full. Because if there's a part of the lower worlds that has not yet been connected, then the yichud, the unification, is not full. So the unification of God's oneness that happens specifically when you use the lowest part of reality, which is ours, is the highest form of unity and yichud that can occur, because it unifies the bottom with the top. There's nothing in between. So this type of yichud and unification of everything through physicality, dafka, He says, for example, kamo aydei tzedakah, like by giving tzedakah, mitzvah. Naisa yichud elyon ba'atzilus l'mayli megan eden. It creates a yichud elyon in atzilus itself, and it was atzilus, as we just mentioned a moment ago, gets benefit from this yichud. L'mayli megan eden, a level of divinity higher than Gan Eden, higher than the Tainug HaNeshamas, Shehu B'Briya, because that's only in the level of Briya, the Tainug of the Neshamas, the Gan Eden. Umalchus Da'atzilus Naisa Atik de Briya. And basically what we're saying is that the Malchus of Atzilus becomes Atik of Briya. We just sort of said this in a second in the introduction, but who can remind us what we said yesterday about this? What's significant about Malchus of Atzilus suddenly becoming Atik of Briya?
It's like the what he says, like the Malchus of the Ein Sof or something like that. Was it like that?
It's connected with that a little bit.
Did we say also that Malchus has like two functions?
There we go.
That
What are we saying?
one function is like a giver, one function is like a endeavor.
Receiver?
It's receiver.
Yeah, receiver.
Right? Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Keep going.
So it like flips over, like it's like the end of one world, and then it flips over to like the mashpia of the next world.
Okay, so that is Malchus of Atzilus is sometimes Atik of Briya.
Yeah.
But what's the significance in terms of everything we just said?
What's Aki?
Atik is the higher part of Keser. Right? Arich and Atik.
In each world?
Yes, there's a Keser of each world.
Atik means old.
It means old, it's true, but
Is it-
in Kabbalah language it means the higher. The Keser has two parts, and it's the higher part of Keser, the
Is
highest
it-
thing.
Is it before when like we're talking about like, when it like punches in?
Yes. Say that. Try and say it out.
So like, how I guess it can filter down to the worlds like in its entirely? Is it instead of going through contractions, it just punches in through each level, just like
It brings the original initial light, which is beyond the world,
Yeah.
and it somehow finds a way to, I guess, punch it in or, reintroduce itself without change, without mask and concealment at each level, through what we call the hishtalshelus of the kesarim, through keser, one level of keser to the next, like sort of jumps over the whole Seder Hishtalshelus into each world. So Keser of Atzilus basically is found in Keser of Bria, which is found in Keser of Yitzir, which is found in Keser of Asiya. And that's sort of this way of preserving the original pristine godliness from above and enabling it to, as he said, punch through into the lower worlds. Yeah?
Is that because the case are connected to the Malchus? Is that because of that?
It is. The place that Keser punches in is
The
in the Malchus of a
So
world.
it goes like-
But only when the Malchus of that world does what? And this is the point that I was trying to get at. When that Malchus of the world does what?
when it
Drawing down.
When it turns into Atik of the world below it. Which is basically when it gives over. Which is the whole idea of what we're saying. Lech Lecha, the whole point of the Mimer is in this. That when you'll go down a level, which is Lech Lecha going down the Seder Hishtalshelus, you're ultimately going up the Seder Hishtalshelus in order to get there. Because to go down, you can only do that if you tap into something much, much higher. So when Malchus of Atzilus turns into Atik of Bria,
wow.
then all of a sudden, what happens? Atik
I'm okay.
is now perceivable in Atzilus. Whereas before that, Atik is way beyond Atzilus. And if Atik sort of goes into Atzilus, it contracts and gives over just an external ray of itself, and that winds up becoming Chochmah Atzilus, which is totally not really on the level of Atik, which is above it. But so then you go all the way down to the bottom of Atzilus, you get to Malchus, and then Malchus decides to open up its mouth and give over to Bria. Then Malchus becomes Atik of Bria, and then suddenly you find that Atik is sitting inside of Atzilus, which that never happened before.
Whoa.
And that's what it means, like punches in. How do you get it to punch in? By going down a level, by giving over. Which is why I'm basically officially stating, everybody sort of privately agreed, more or less, we're going to start to take the classes, each one in their own words, not each class, at the end of each week, which so today would be the first assignment. Based on this awesome idea that Shaul is rightfully woeing,
Whoa.
the whole point is I think we should put this into action, especially it's a Hakel year. We got to get band together. This is basically part of the We'll get to that. Part of the registry for this class is that it now comes with a homework assignment. So if you're going to be here, this is part of the deal. Okay? And the idea is that on Friday, everyone is meant to take the mimer that we worked on that week, their notes, the mimer itself, whatever you can do with it, and however, much time you can put into it, and write a short essay in your own words, the way you understood the mimer, trying to give it over authentically. In other words, you don't have to necessarily look for bringing out chidushim, just try to explain what we said. To whom? To basically a theoretical list of your friends and family. In other words, who's the audience that you're writing to? Not to me, to them. Right? People who may be religious, may not be religious, may know what Chassidus is, may not know what Chassidus is. And let's say I'm not forcing you at this point to go out and stand on a soapbox, but maybe you'll want to after you write it. But the idea is that it could be short, it could be long. That's up to you. But that's the charge of admission right now. We're going to do this. This is assignment of the class. Everybody's ready for this?
I'm not going to be here.
Okay, listen. Visitors are exempt.
Wow.
They're exempt because they're visitors. No one said they're allowed to just be visitors, but we'll get to that when we learn about Hakel. Okay, you're in, Dale? All right, so today is this Friday, so we'll do as much as we can. You can gather from what we've learned about Lecha this week, put it into your own words, and you can send it to me, and then maybe we'll send it out. We'll talk about that. I'll be in touch with you guys through email. My email is shalompasternak@gmail.com. So try and get in early enough I can read them over before Shabbos.
Follow no dot in the middle?
shalompasternak@gmail.com. Okay? Levi?
I hear ya.
Alright, Baruch Hashem. That's already big right there. That means you're up and at 'em, ready to go. Alright, that being said, this is the whole concept. Why is this an important assignment? Because when you give over, you'll suddenly realize that you've just received from Atik. And that's pretty much what you're looking for. Again, it's interesting to note, just before we just finish this sentence, this is how the Rebbe taught also. You have to understand, the Rebbe didn't write books, interestingly. And most people do not access the Rebbe's teachings through listening to his 10,000 hours of Verbrengens. I would say most people do not access the Rebbe's teachings that way, right? And yet everyone's accessing the Rebbe's teachings left, right, and center. How do they do it? The Rebbe wanted that other people should write down the words, other people should transfer them, because there's and the whole idea is that it should basically own it and give it over. But the Rebbe's whole thing is, if you know Aleph, teach Aleph. What is that all about? That's exactly what this is. It's not just like a nice idea to start outreach. It's like the greatest gift you can give in an educational program. If you know it, teach it. It's not just for the other guy.
They did a research. If you speak it, it's like 20% retained. If you just notes, if you just hear it, and if you speak it, it's like another 40%. And if you actually write it, or right before you write it, it's like another 20%.
So in this, wonderful. That's totally. I think that's very, very much an accurate study. But in this case, what we're talking about is retained is Elokus. We're talking about God, basically, in these words. So you get 20% of God if you just listen to the class. If you sort of say it over, you get, I'm saying, you're internalizing Elokus. This is the way to do it. This is the only way to do it. So it's very, very significant aspect of the learning here.
So I guess we should talk the most.
What's that?
I guess we should talk the most.
Definitely, that's in a chavrusa. You don't just sit there and learn like in a library. Once someone came into Hadara Torah many, many years ago, and he said to the Rabbi Goldberg, he said, it's a great place you got here, but it's so loud. Everyone's like, who learns like this? It's like a, you go to a normal place, like a library, a fancy library, you can hear a pin drop. This is not how you do things. He says, that is because this is called a seminary, and those places are called a cemetery. You can't let that laugh, man. L'chaim. All right. Anyway, so you got to speak it out for sure. That's the end of a chavrusa. All right. So anyway. What's that?
What was that? That's it.
Okay. So Malchus of Atzilus gets turned into Atik of Bria, which basically what we're saying here Shemitzedek naisa tzedakah. Dalid nasa hey. Kamo shekasuv b'zohar ad lo kvilas dachar. So he doesn't really go into this greatly. Fortunately, it's mentioned in some other places. But he says basically what happens is like this. He really is just like, again, this is like sort of the Alter Rebbe, like throwing things out there. If you don't see it in another place, it's really totally unrecognizable. But what he's saying here is like this. This happens to be found in Basi Lagani, this whole notion. So the Indian of Tzedek, right, is essentially the sphere of Malchus is called Tzedek sometimes. And then the idea is that it becomes Tzedakah. What is Tzedakah? Tzedakah is the act of giving. In other words, there's righteousness, right? The person is just like intrinsically righteous. That's the Indian of Malchus of Atzilus, just like receiving everything from the higher world. As we said, it's sort of the revelation of what all the things that are above it. Tzedek, the perfect justice, the righteousness. This is what Malchus of Atzilus is when it's just receiving. When it suddenly becomes tzedakah is when it starts to give. Basically, it's now like in the active form of giving tzedakah. And what happens ultimately is that the sphere of Malchus can sometimes be a dalid, can sometimes be an Indian of a dalid, and can sometimes be an Indian of a hey. In other words, sometimes the letter dalid is associated with it, where we see that sort of like the dalid on the back of the tefillin, right? It makes a little dalid from our tefillin. It's supposed to be sort of the back of the head, which is the bottom part of the world. It's something called a dalid rabasai, the Shema. When we say Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, the dalid there in the Torah is big. It's a big dalid, bigger than the other letters, and it's supposed to represent sort of like like Malchus of Atzilus. Why is it big? Because it's receiving all the lights of Atzilus above it. But this dalid can turn into a hey. And what's the Indian of a hey?
How does it do that?
Well, when it turns from Malchus of Atzilus into Atik of Bria, is what we're saying, is it changes its status of being a dalid to a hey. And what is that? What's the significance by it? So first of all, the Indian of tzedakah versus tzedek is that the tzedakah has a hey now in it. Whereas in tzedek it doesn't have the hey. It basically remains at the dalid.
Yeah.
So when it turns into, all right, we'll get it. There's a few pieces you have to put together into this puzzle. But basically, what's that?
Yeah, I don't really understand any of this stuff.
Okay, so I said, the Alter Rebbe says a very small line, like based on Kabbalah. I'm trying to explain it to you. Let's bring out the points, and then we'll see how it all comes together. At this point, I don't think anyone understands it fully yet.
I understand it.
Okay, we got one on board. So the idea is, again, Malchus of Atzilus can either be called a dalid or a hey. Why is it called a dalid? I just explained. There's a certain aspects of it which are sort of like the reception of this Indian of a dalid, this big dalid at the end of Atzilus. But it can also be called a hey. What's the difference between a dalid and a hey? Let's start with this. We learned about this before together. The dalid has a little yud sticking off the back of it. Remember that?
Yeah.
When you make a dalid, it's like a reish, but it has a little yud sticking off the behind.
Right.
And then the idea of a hey is that you then take that yud and you put it in front of the dalid, and it becomes the little left leg of the dalid is now the hey. Right?
Gosh.
You with me there?
Whoa.
So how did that happen? Because this is gimel dalid, basically. Gimel is like some kind of a giving over. The dalid represents, literally the word dalid means poor, right? Dal means poor. So when you give to the poor, gimel dalid, then you wind up with a hey. And the idea of the poor here represents the Malchus of Atzilus. In its state before it gives over, it's poor. Why? Because it's the lowest part of Atzilus. It's sort of like dangling at the end there. It has the least amount of godliness in the world of Atzilus because the tzimtzum goes all the way down, so it's poor. But if you give over to it, something like, in other words, it's going to now give tzedakah. It's going to now generously bestow the world below it. So in doing so, you enrich that poor because it receives from Atik, as we said a second ago, in order to go low, and it produces a hey, the little yud, which was representing the dalid's back-to-back connection, because the Yud was behind the Dalet, and its only connection with godliness was sort of one that it was what we call a back-to-back relationship, which means it didn't have a full perception of godliness. It was just stuck onto the back. Now that it gives over and gives tzedakah, you add a hey, similar Indian of Avram's hey, then it flips around, and now the Dalet and the Yud are facing each other, because the Dalet is having this incredible experience of godliness that it didn't have until it gave tzedakah. And that's when it distributes life, tzedakah, to the lower world below it. That's called, now it turns into atik, so the whole of Atzilus is now, I see, where are you going? See what I did? You understand? Okay, Lev, is that clearer? Is that a little step clearer?
Sure.
Totally clear, or just a step clearer?
We
The truth is, we've had like many classes about this one topic in a different
Well, we have to
time.
remember that it's Dalet before Hey, and so Atzilus is before Bria. So it's Dalet Hey, it's automatic progression.
Yeah.
Did we say something similar with like that Adam and Chava were like back to back?
Yeah. Same idea. Same exact thing. What is Chava? She's Malchus. Adam represents Zah. Right? So at first they're back to back, meaning the experience that they're having each other, they're connected. There's a unity there, just like Malchus of Atzilus is unified with the rest of Atzilus, but it's one that it doesn't really experience the fullness of what her husband is, which is basically they're not talking, right? Exactly. There's no exactly to Pasha. They're not talking. There's no transference from one to the other. Certainly not having babies in that position, right? So the idea is that then there's a separation, which is the idea. What is the separation? I'm going to have some other in mind. The separation is like, who talked about Bria? What are you talking about? There's a Bria? There's a creation? I thought, who mentioned Bria? So there's a Bria. Remember we said by Avraham, first you create the Yesh in order that the Yesh can then be Batal. In other words, you want the Yesh because Hashem wants a Dira B'Tachtoni. Right? So you want there to be a separateness, but not for separateness' sake. But you can't access the Kesser unless you give. Who are you giving to? You need to create an other. An other is like a huge descent, right? But once you create that separation, why do I say the separation is the descent? The man had to be put to sleep. And that represents gullus before the separation, before they can wake up and see each other. So that's the whole idea that he's now going to speak. You're now going to give, your tzedek is going to turn into tzedakah. That unfortunately means that there's a poor person that doesn't have anything, that you're going to have to give it to.
Right.
So, but then once the giving happens, they're now having a face-to-face relationship, and everybody receives. Because ultimately what you've done is you created a lower level of reality, but you've joined yet that level of reality to godliness, so you've made a yichud. And that yichud, again, same thing we said before, that yichud benefits even the man. He didn't even realize such a yichud could happen. Okay, it's hard to put all this into words.
It's like gimel, a little gimel, it's like gomel, like to give, and then like dalet is like dal, give,
the
gimel
poor.
gives to the poor,
Right.
and then what happens from that? Hey, which is
Right.
like Hashem and like a lot of like holiness.
Right.
Is that what you mean?
Yeah. The hay represents the yud is now face to face with the dalid.
Okay, all right.
Right, which means it's having this front to front relationship, like a full disclosure here of what Elokus is. Before it was only getting a ray of it.
It's interesting because like there's like unity before that this like other was created. So then like once the other was created, now it's disunity. And then like Adam has to like go to a higher place, like we were saying,
You know,
to
to
like
recapture that unity.
recapture the unity that he already had.
Well, it's not the same unity that he
It's
already
like a
had.
higher
The unity
level
that he already had was not a unity of such a low level.
Right.
So that's why it's a higher level of divinity to show that he can even make oneness with the lower level and a lower level. And Lech Lecha, right? So you're going. The whole idea is we're going lower and lower and lower and lower, and in doing so, we're bringing forth greater and greater and greater wonder of Hashem that He can be one with even such a low level. So it's a descent, which is really an ascent.
Right, and I guess it makes sense like why Hashem would make like the other be so otherness.
Right. Because
it's like
that's a
ultimate
gewaldige unity.
Like
right?
I'll make the exact opposite of you.
Yes.
So therefore you can unify like the highest degree.
And that's what we say, when you unify things with gashmiistic mitzvahs,
Right.
you make a pillar that touches the ground to the ceiling.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden, like this oneness comes out into the entire Seder Yishtalshus because it didn't realize how great God was. Right? That it can unify such a low thing. That it's also, this is part of God.
But it's not for Hashem because Hashem's already like unified and perfect. It's just for us and to reach into a higher level of unity. what I'm saying?
We're saying it's not for Hashem. Obviously, Hashem doesn't lack anything.
Right.
But the idea is that this is how Hashem doesn't lack anything. It's a revelation of Hashem. He's showing himself. He's revealing himself. All that he is.
It's like revelation of high unity can only be like accomplished through unifying this lower level.
Right. So it's not, so to speak, just a stam thing for us that he like pulls out a certain concealment of himself. It's within his own being of revealing his essence. He's got to show that there's something totally separate from him that's part of him. Now he doesn't have to show it, but the very showing of it is the revelation of this essence. Mm-hmm. That's so. In other words, we're sitting in this world. It's a huge part of the essence of God. It's like the sort of the fundamental piece which enables the essence of God to show itself.
That's like his signature. Is like fuse paradoxes or like
together. It's the signature. That's right. It's the seal.
It's his seal.
And we're in it.
Right.
For a short time.
Like fuse
paradoxes.
paradoxes.
Got a chaperine, just
fuse opposites together.
Fundamental seal.
Gashmius, the lowest place. The fact that Hashem makes a lowest place, which is us, this itself is the seal or of the revelation of His essence. Because what is the idea of the essence? Is that no matter how low you go, Hashem is unified with that as well. So He doesn't have to, but it's part and parcel of His revealing His essence that He must bring out the lowest. How low can you go? The lowest of all lows, and so that can be joined to godliness. So if he doesn't go low enough, He's not revealing His true essence, because His true essence is defined by that the dafka, the lowest things, I am there. Right? That is also part of me.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, so let's just finish this line. So it becomes the dalid nice a hey. The dalid becomes a hey. Kamosha kusu bezohar, as it says in the Zohar, ad lo kavilas dachar. That until it receives the masculine, right? It's just the dalid. When it receives the masculine, it turns into a hey. So it knows this kli, this dalid, is just like sort of the receiver. When it receives the masculine, what is the masculine? I guess it's the idea of like the giver, but it's the notion of in relations, I guess, right? That the woman herself, until she receives the seed of the man, she doesn't realize that she has this like crazy power of making something from nothing, right? She has it, and it's like within her sort of biology and so forth, but until she actually gives over and utilizes this wondrous thing that she has of childbirth, she doesn't realize that power within herself.
Right.
So it's a dalid and she's poor until it receives the masculine, until it gives over and shows the power of birth. Then it becomes a hey.
So it's all the letters are like interchangeable. They're interchanging all the time, and it becomes one letter. Like all the letters, like as you go through the alphabet, are changing shapes, but it's all one. It's all connected to one. All the letters are connected to one big unit, like a chain.
Okay, that sounds great. Is that what we're saying here, basically?
I don't know.
It is a cool idea. I mean, there is such a...
I've heard that everything is in Aleph.
What?
I've heard that everything is in Aleph.
Yeah.
But Alep's not here today. He ain't coming.
Okay. V'lechein, therefore, lo nemmar, we're going forward. Lechein, lo nemmar b'Torah, therefore it does not say in the Torah, Milas Avram, this quality of Avram, Shayamachil Orchim, that he was feeding the poor. He was feeding the guests, right? He was a big Hachnasis Orchim guy. He had a whole hotel, basically Chabad house, going full strong in the desert. It doesn't mention that openly in the Torah. Ad Shabbat Eretz Yisrael, v'lo b'chutz la'aretz, until he came to Eretz Yisrael, not in chutz la'aretz. So he was 75 years old before he came to chutz la'aretz, and he started his mission when he was 3, when he was 40. In other words, according to all opinions, he started his mission long before, and it says, HaNefesh Asher Asu B'Charan, he made all kinds of converts in Haran. He was doing heavy duty work of service Hashem also in Eretz Yisrael. But it says Lech Lecha, 75 years old, which means we don't even hear about his good works until he comes to Eretz Yisrael. Why is that? Hagam Shekivar Haya Ben Ayin Hey, even though he was already 75, we don't hear about anything of his life and all of his good deeds until he came to Eretz Yisrael. Ela Shebetechila Af Im Haya Oseh Lo haya mamshich klum. How do you like that? Because to begin with, even if he would have done, he wouldn't have drawn down anything. In other words, this power of sort of like bringing atik to bear. When you give, it didn't happen yet. Like the world was still in this sort of state of tohu. Avram made this whole process that we're describing all these days, he made it possible. And it could only start in Eretz Yisrael.
After going to Mitzrayim.
Right. Well, no. After who going to Mitzrayim?
Abraham.
No, he went to Mitzrayim after he came to Eretz Yisrael.
Oh, wow. So what was his Yerida?
No, we're not talking about... No, the idea of the Yerida is not so much that he actually went down in a negative way. The idea of the Yerida is he got a hay in his name.
Right.
In other words, that also, frankly, happened after he did go to Mitzrayim, but that's an interesting addition. But we're saying is, before he came to Eretz Yisrael, this whole notion of basically being Avraham was not available. In other words, the notion of bringing godliness down into a mashal, in order to preserve the truth and have it be present in a lower world, was impossible. Even if he would have done all these things, give tzedakah, perform mitzvahs, etc., it wouldn't have drawn down klum, it says. It wouldn't have happened. The process wouldn't happen. The whole device and mechanism to enable godliness to come down into this world as it is above, like this whole punching in thing, like we said about Kesser, it wasn't in place yet. It couldn't be. We said even by Noach, it was even worse. Like the world had to be washed away and purified and destroyed to even get it to the state where Avram could make this happen. There were stages of development. V'lo haya nogea liyichud elyon ad shevayomer Hashem el Avram. It was not even possible, this great yichud that we're discussing, unifying the lowest and the highest, until the quote vayomer Hashem el Avram, until Hashem spoke to Avram. But Maimer, in this very statement, Lech Lecha, this is it, right? Lech Lecha is huge. When Hashem said those words, it was practically like saying, Anochi Hashem Elokecha. He gave over the ability for this process to happen, to go down. Before that, Avram was stuck up there. And when Hashem says to Avram, Lech Lecha, you follow what's really happening, L'mayla, spirit, pretend that Avram is not a man, per se, of flesh and blood. He's a level called Chochmei Ilah. And suddenly, at a certain point in history, Hashem says to Chochmei Ilah, Avram, Lech Lecha, go down. That's a big chiddush. Hashem never said that to the world before. So there was like a big distinct between heaven and earth. They couldn't come together until this. And this happened, Dafka coming to Eretz Yisrael. Eretz Yisrael is a big part of it. At the end of the day, when he told him to Lech Lecha, he told him to go to Eretz Yisrael. See what I'm saying? What's that? No, but yeah, I mean, it's every line is like the whole Maimer. That's the beauty. He just keeps saying the same beautiful concept over and over again. But what he's saying here is that Avram, even though he was busy doing all the mitzvahs before he came to Eretz Yisrael, before Hashem gave him the speech, the prophecy Lech Lecha, none of the accomplishments that he did are mentioned in the Torah because they were meaningless. Because the ability to actually make godliness come down into a physical world was not yet granted up from on high. So no matter what people would do down here, that's what I'm saying, it wasn't Noach's fault that he couldn't save the generation. The world was not able to have godliness in it. So when was it able to? Hashem had to sort of sign on. What was Hashem signing on? Vayomer Hashem el Avram Lech Lecha. Who's Avram? Not necessarily not only a man of flesh and blood. He's the level of Chochmei Ilah, this level of divine wisdom which was trapped above the world and it could not be seen in the world. Hashem said to it, go down. And how did that happen? By Avram Avinu walking into Eretz Yisrael. That was the going down. In other words, that Eretz Yisrael, in other words, is the quintessential place and prize. In other words, you could say Tefillin is a mashal. You could say, Tzedakah is a mashal. The Esrog is a mashal. Those are three mashalim we gave. But the ultimate mashal is the land of Israel. It is a physical place in which God dwells. It's like the great giant Tefillin. Right? Where Kedusha is permeated in it. So he said, Lech Lecha, go there, Dafka, to the land that I will show you. Wow. Never thought about that before. It's crazy. Eretz HaKodesh. Woof.
Yeah. I have a question if you're saying before that Avram was Tikkun.
Yes.
And then the time before him was like Tar, that's why Noah couldn't...
Tohu.
That's why Noah couldn't refine it because
right.
Tohu. And now we're saying that like Avram, how he fixed it is by like he was God's Eretz Yisrael to give. that's like the fix that's like the tikkun.
Not only to give, because he gave before he came to Eretz Yisrael.
Oh,
right?
it
It is the giving that makes it happen. But even the fact that giving will make this crazy thing happen,
Yeah.
that also had to be like sort of introduced by God. That such a mechanism is in place that when you'll give, you'll receive the atik.
Right.
Before he was giving. Noach was also giving. You could give all you want, but Hashem had not like sort of undone the seal. He hadn't taken like the foreskin off of the world yet, as it were. So that giving meant anything. Before you had, when you give a seed with a foreskin, it's also called giving. The problem is, it goes through this shell, and what comes out on the other side is not a pure transference of the real thing.
I learned that Noach didn't give. The Noach's mistake was he didn't pray for generation.
Okay, that's what you learned, and that's what it says. I'm not denying that, but I'm giving you like the underbelly of the Hasidic dimension of it, which is that why is it that he couldn't pray for his generations because it wouldn't have worked.
What did he give?
He gave a life of service to God. He basically sat there for 120 years, building an ark. Everyone came up and said, "Why are you building it?" He says, "Because the world's going to get destroyed, and I'm telling you to do tshuva." He didn't try to do it. For 120 years, he was nothing but tshuva. He was the great Chabad house of tshuva for 120 years. And why didn't it work? Because the world was not. Hashem didn't give the go ahead. Only to Noach he gave the go ahead.
He also gave what
He didn't tell anybody else to get on the. Yeah.
I'm just curious if that's what we're talking about. Like, if the giving, the world maybe wasn't ready for it or whatever.
Right.
Say the world's ready for it, and like that's what's going to fix everything. Is like Avraham is like giving, and you see like the Malchus is flipping over, and
Right,
there's
the whole
like
business.
spiritual like light
Nice.
coming down into like an hourglass, and you have like 1,000 mushrooms, whatever.
Right.
Like we said before, like that time in history is like done. That tikkun time, like that giving rectification is like already accomplished. So I guess my question is like in the next phase, like Mashiach consciousness, like what is the rectification that's going to be like?
So what you're saying is the Rebbe said we've already refined all the sparks.
Yeah.
So the whole idea of Avram being the father of many nations, turning them from like their klippa status to a connected status, so to speak, is done.
Right.
Well, and Mashiach. Okay, so the idea is that, like I said before, the difference between that stage and the days of Mashiach is like weekday and Shabbos.
Okay.
The weekday is the Indian of borer. You're separating the avodas habirurim. That's what we always talk about. This idea of getting the godliness to come out of the entity, like the godly spark. That's called the avodas habirurim, the refinement process. That's what Avraham was busy doing. That's what we do with the mitzvah. We're refining the world. But the idea is that on Shabbos, you no longer have to separate good from evil and make the tikkun of the shviras hakeli. What's it called tikkun? Because it broke and you have to fix it.
Right.
So you're separating when it broke, everything got mixed in with an element of klippa, and a Jew's job is to come take the Torah and sort of remove the element of klippa from the life force of the thing and show that the thing itself can be rejoined to godliness. So it's a separation process. You're basically going around putting materials over here, gathering materials over here, making clear what's going on. But then that's called preparing for Shabbos. Someone who's not Someone who doesn't prepare on Erev Shabbos will not eat on Shabbos.
Right.
But the eating, so to speak, the real godliness comes on Shabbos. And that's the idea of no longer are you merely separating things, you're now actually drawing higher levels of divinity in the world. Meaning what? When you give tzedakah and Atik is revealed, you don't necessarily experience Atik being revealed. The Atik we said was Tainug, right? You don't necessarily experience in while you're busy fixing things the 6 days of the week. You don't experience the tainug, right? Because you're busy working. When you're in the work, the pleasure of the work that you're doing is not felt yet. Shabbos is the union of tainug. So now we're going to bring revelations of all the work that we've done. Yes, we've united the world. Yes, we've revealed inside the world the level of atik and joined the top to the bottom, but we don't feel it. And on the contrary, should we feel it, we wouldn't be called the tachtonim. We couldn't accomplish the job if we felt it, because the whole point is God wanted to join godliness to a place which doesn't even know Him, see Him, or feel Him. So we needed to preserve our separateness, which means we don't feel God or know God, and we're sort of like this pushed off physical aspect of creation in order to get the essence to come out. But then you also get to eat, which means that you actually experience the essence as well. So the whole level of Shabbos is basically is not just refining the world and making the job happen, but experiencing the tainug of the essence.
Also preparation.
Of the what?
Of the
All the preparations that you did. Right?
But isn't Shabbos like the Mashiach?
Yeah.
But then how the Rebbe is saying that all the Birurim are done? Like
he says because
the preparation is finished.
He's saying go into Shabbos zone now. You can bring in Shabbos early. And what does it mean to bring in Shabbos early? He's like, basically we're seeing a world which is completely different than any world that's ever been seen before. You can see it through technology, if you want to look with sort of external eyes, or you can see it through this, what we're doing right now. Jews did not sit around with the ability to talk about God in this way and experience like the divine pleasure, at least intellectually, potentially even emotionally, if you work on it, of divinity, because they didn't have these words, they didn't have it, they didn't have Chassidus. So in other words, you could see that the world is, and they certainly didn't have Chassidus printed in such nice books, and everybody has their own, right? And it's in every language you can imagine. Like this is something which is brand new, hot off the press. You understand? This is the Tainug. This is the Keser Malchus. This is something that we take for granted. He's saying basically, and you can why I say you united it with technology because they come out at the same time. It's like a physical version and a spiritual version of the same thing. A completely new world based on pulling out the inner treasures which completely transform the way we used to live our lives. So you can see it because you can suddenly talk to your mom in China. Well, it's like no problem. In fact, I see her and watch everything she does while I'm talking to her. Do you think that's normal? Do you understand like what's happening over here? And really, what it is that's creating that is that Chassidus is being learned throughout the world, and it's the pleasure. It's like basically revealing God. We just have to open our eyes, as the Rebbe said. And don't you understand that it's all around you? Just have a look. Change your perspective. We're living in those times of Mashiach right now.
Would you say then if the activation of the first one is giving, then the second stage is like connection is the activation, or like what is like that determining factor?
What?
Of like what?
No, I would say it's the same thing, like to give over.
Oh, okay.
Because that's but in other words, the level that you're reaching becomes suddenly experienceable, as opposed to before when it was just sort of the will. I guess the difference is that there's the will of God and there's the pleasure of God. Kesser has two parts. So the Ratzon is that you do it and you don't really feel any joy. On the contrary, sometimes when you're doing the will, it can be even it can be displeasurable.
Okay.
Right? Because you're just doing the mitzvah, like Mesiras Nefesh, Kabbalah Soul. Or you can do the same exact mitzvah and you can experience the inner sort of divine joy behind it. And that's the Shabbos, it's a Tainug. And that's available now. Just like in Noach's time, there had to be a flood. And in Abraham's time, there had to be a Milah. In our times, there had to be sort of an opening that the Hasidic teachings could come out. There was also, the world was not ready to experience this flooding of the world of divinity. And we just took off another Milah. And our Rebbe, our generation, was like the end of it. You know what I'm saying? It was huge. It's a complete finishing of the job. So all of a sudden, the things that are available to us were not available. The level of experiencing of divinity that we have was not available before. Just like before Avraham, there was a different world. We've also entered a different world. The Rebbe Pashad put it on the map. He said it. He said, this is the first generation of Mashiach. This generation, his generation, is a generation of Mashiach. No one ever said that before. And we're in a different situation right now. What do we do? How do we get there? So the Rebbe told us also that.
Who's going to be here to tell us when the second stage happens?
I don't think we're going to need to be told. It's going to be pretty evident.
This is the final end.
All right, so let's just go on one more line. So until he got to Eretz Yisrael, so in the beginning, if he would have done it, it wouldn't have even have accomplished anything.
Can I ask you a question?
Oh yeah, sure.
You say, why didn't we know of Avram's life before, basically?
Yeah.
We knew something.
We knew that he was born, but we don't hear about his good deeds. We don't hear that he set up his tent.
He was the first one to believe in Hashem.
We don't see that in the Torah anywhere. It's not recorded in the Torah.
That's not recorded in the Torah.
I'm saying in the actual Torah, all it says is that Avram was, at the end of Parshas Noach, it talks about how Avram was born. Right? It mentions the word Ur Kasdim. And from Midrashim, we sort of know things that he was up to some good special things.
Fire from Rashi.
Right. Okay, but the Torah is not befeirush say there was any real communication or specialty about this person. If you just read Parshas Noach and you didn't have Mefarshim, you wouldn't think there's any particular special thing about Avram. He's just like another name out of many names. Suddenly comes Parshas Lecha. It's an entire parsha about Avram Avinu, and it starts with a divine communication with him, Lecha, right? So why suddenly, when he's 75 years old, after 75 years of unbelievable service to God, why didn't Hashem speak to him and get him into the Torah before, when he's 23, I don't know, something? Why is his introduction, so to speak, as a character of great importance, put it like that, start when he's 75 years old? And the reason is because that's when Hashem took off the barriers and allowed essential wisdom to descend into the world. Up until that point, it was not, everything he did was just like anybody else doing it, so to speak, in terms of its ability to affect the world.
Wait, Hashem simply did that? Like, he just did that?
I guess Avram's amazing service had something to do with it. But yes, Hashem simply did that. It was like, there's a time that Hashem has a plan for the development of his plan to unravel, that godliness will be in the world. That was a significant date. I think they say it was 1948. In the actual real years. In the year 1948 was when Avram was spoken to. It's pretty interesting, huh? It's mamash amazing, actually.
Yeah.
I think that is actually a fact, if I'm not mistaken.
It is a fact, yeah.
That's insane, no?
Why is that?
Because the state of Israel, Lech Lecha, for the whole Jewish people, was in, so to speak, 1948. That's what everyone's talking about.
Whoa. When I saw that, I was like, what?
There is a God. Even though it's like a goyish thing.
Wow.
It says, yeah.
But it's not,
There's this thing that Hashem Yispor Bichsov Amim. One time, there was a story, I don't know if it's true, I think it's true. The Rebbe turned to Rabbi Groner on New Year's Eve, like January 1st, and he says, Happy New Year. And Rabbi Groner was like, this is like, what are you talking about? This is like he just gave the look. And the Rebbe said to him, Hashem Yispor Bichsov Amim. It says, we say in like the benching Tehillim, that Hashem counts in the writings of the nations as well. What? Their calendar is also God's calendar. I mean, there's nothing but God. So, there's something to their solar dates as well. Just this last line here. So, okay. So, once Hashem said to Avram, as it were, Avram, Lech Lecha, Vayomer Hashem, Matzil Elyon, Hamshich El Avram, Lech Lecha. Right? So basically he said to the Vayomer Hashem, who's Hashem? Matzil Elyon, the great emanator. Matzil is emanator. Himshich El Avram, go down to Avram, Lech Lecha. He said it to Avram, he said it to the higher wisdom, go down. Lios Yerid of Ishtalshlus, so that you will be able to go down into the Ishtalshlus. Vazai Nimshach Lios Yechud Elyon. And then at that point it will come down that this Yechud Elyon, Toloi V'maisa Tachtonim, it will all depend on the deeds of man. Once Avram was basically sent down there to do it, then it means that in order that there's a way to unite the lowest to the highest, and it depends on man doing the deed of accomplishing the mitzvahs. The Iker Giloi Hayichud Hu Aidei Torah, and the main way that we're going to show this is through the Torah. The Torah is our sort of
roadmap.
Exactly, our roadmap in order to figure out how it's done. In other words, meaning to say it didn't happen yet because we didn't get the Torah yet. Ha'avos. But the fathers, asu hachanal b'chinas Torah, they did a preparation work for the Torah. So the main way this is going to happen, that someone in the lower realms can do something to access the Kesser and everything we've been saying, that's really going to only happen when the Torah is given. Because really, even after Avram, there was still no mitzvahs for him. Only he had a mitzvah, right? He had the mitzvah of Milah, and he was like sort of personally the only Jew. He was able to do it. But en masse, that there could be such a thing that regular people, at least Jews, a whole army of them, were able to do these deeds and draw down this. That would only happen by Torah. But the Avros made a hachana l'bechinas Torah. They were a preparation to the Torah. K'moshekasu v'Torah sam b'Yisrael, as it says, he placed the Torah in Yisrael al yedei Yisrael, through the Jewish people. That's how it will ultimately be accomplished. Not yet through the Avos. Okay. All right, I don't want to just throw out words, so I was trying to finish it. We'll finish it up on Shabbos.
I got a little lost in the
very end
basically,
there.
Basically the whole concept of firmament, like
of what?
Basically, in the whole,
Wow.
like, I don't know, in a moment I got like lost. Like what? Why did Abraham?
Wait, hold on a second before you go. Let's say by 3 o'clock, we can have these essays written. Take some time, take the day. Okay, it's also a miftzoim because you'll send it out to people. And my email is shalompasternak@gmail.com. Everyone's in? All right, let's do it. Let's see if we can make this happen. It'd be amazing. Okay, go ahead.
So what is so that Abraham is a higher chokhmah, and then he went to Atik to go and bring it down to Bina or something. I don't know, for something.
Serious?
I kind of like lost it. I had it and I lost it.
He gave it. He's up with the rubber band.
The roller, right?
You have to stretch. You don't stretch one first. You stretch at the same time. You go down to come up.
How did he go down? He went to Atik. Because I'm confusing myself with the sikha we're doing where I go in that it's like a whole different, same thing but different thing, and I don't know. The only reason why he could do what he did is because he went to Mitzvah. That's the only reason why. So now we're doing like something completely different. Like he went to Atik and then he brought it down. What?
Like we said before that it's like the same thing. Like the going down, going up, whereas at the same exact time.
I worked at the same time.
Yeah.
That was the thing?
Like the rubber band.
Like the rubber band.
Okay, how?
Like in order to go down, he has to go to a higher source.
Okay.
No, let me put it like this. Don't get confused about the sikha. There's two different things going on here. One is talking about Hashem's giving the permission for a new order to come into the world, a new concept of divinity to come into the world. That happens before Avraham goes to Mitzrayim. That's called Lecha. And he's telling Avraham, go down. In eternal godly wisdom, you will now be able to be perceived below, which before that was not a possibility. Okay, so that's the basic concept here. That's
like before he couldn't give like Elokus was not perceivable in the world.
Yes, it was not perceivable in the world. It wasn't even potentially perceivable in the world. Because Hashem had not yet sort of granted, from his perspective, the right mashalim, the right words, the right actions, so that you could say, oh, that's a godly act and that's not. It was all not a godly act. There was nothing uniquely godly that Hashem had granted the lower worlds to yet have. Right? So when he said to Avram, which means Chochma Vatzilus, go down there, he was saying, okay, now I'm going to give it. But how does it work? By basically descending into Gashmi as thicker things, like a Mila, Tzedakah, a Lulav, Esrog, whatever, in this particular case. Just the concept that Avram could go down, the literally physical walking of Avram to Eretz Yisrael was already a huge pa'ula. That's what I'm saying. Before you get to any mitzvahs, his entrance into Eretz Yisrael was already an aspect of exalted wisdom coming down to the land. Activity.
Okay.
So now you're going to say there's another sikha that Avraham went to Mitzrayim, and through going down into the Gullus, he was able to accomplish many things. Okay, that was the manifestation of what we're talking about right now.
Okay.
But the fact that he could do anything, that the work of man could accomplish something in this world, was because of the statement Lecha. So you could say that what Avram was able to accomplish with his own two hands, from below to above, yeah, he had to go to Mitzrayim, he had to do this, he had to do that. It doesn't bother me there. But the fact that any of that would even work, that a man could do something that could accomplish a revelation of godliness, that had to start from a statement from Hashem. That exalted wisdom can now find its way down into the lower world.
Right.
You can almost say that's the beginning of our whole Jewish everything.
It is.
At one point.
So the question you would ask someone would be, yeah, I mean, okay.